Sorry for the long wait, no sleep. I really do appreciate your concern. I can't even describe how busy I am right now. Faye's older sister Becca and her baby son Caleb are here, staying in the guest room. It's finals next week for my students, so I'm hosting tons of meetings with them, and I've only got one of the 3 major projects done for my doctoral advisor. And I'm grading a huge stack of essays. Oh. And something is trying to steal my fiance's skin or mind controller into killing me or something. So yeah, it's been pretty busy around here. How about you? And secondly, I feel that my experiences at the cabin and the subsequent events are becoming overlong, and my biggest fear is that people here are going to get sick of hearing from me. So I'm going to try and post less and say more. Friday morning. My ass hadn't even warmed the seat in my office before I got a call from Faye's boss notifying me that Faye has been acting erratic. Erratic, in fact, to the point that they sent her home from work. She apparently stood in the open doorway of one of the storehouses, staring into the darkness within, not moving for several minutes. A coworker tried twice to get her to snap out of it, but she did not. A few minutes later, the boss came over and found Faye inside, standing in the shadows looking out. It was pitch black inside the storehouse, so when the boss flipped on the lights, she found Faye standing there in the corner just smiling up at her, eyes unfocused. A few seconds later, she came right out of it and went back to work. About an hour later, my fiancé allegedly claimed that she could feel eyes on her while she was working and had to go inside the break room to sit down. Her coworkers found her fast asleep and just left her there, thinking she was hungover or sick, and went to lunch. When they came back, Faye was sleepwalking in large circles around the perimeter of the room, singing a lullaby. This scared the other employees so much that they got the park manager to actually drive her home. They didn't trust her to drive. Now Faye has to take a drug test because they think she's on drugs. Thankfully, she's completely clean. When I got home, I immediately took Faye to urgent care, who miraculously got us in a reasonable amount of time. We explained everything. Everything. I thought the doctors would think we were insane, but both of them actually looked scared shitless. After a CAT scan, a blood panel, and several other small tests, they concluded that Faye seems to be healthy, but needs a full psychiatric evaluation. They gave us a referral and we made an appointment, but it's 2 weeks out. We'll have the blood panel back sooner. When we got home, Faye took a nap, and I went out into the woods across the street from our neighborhood where I saw T-Way in the dream. For those of you who aren't caught up, it's pronounced T-Way, and we still don't know how he died. I wandered around between the trees, trying to figure out if there was something I needed to find. For about 10 minutes, I searched and found nothing. But then I remembered the phrase that many of the voices at the cabin kept repeating. Up in the trees, or down in the hole. You go up in the trees, or all the way down. Down, down, so deep you never see the light again. There were so many variants of that phrase I can't remember them all, but I looked up at the tops of the trees, and voila. There was a little crudely constructed object made from twigs and twine dangling from a branch about 30 feet off the ground. It looked kind of like the dream catcher we found at the cabin, but it was obviously made with the twigs from the very tree from which it dangled, so it was a different color and shape. I climbed up the tree and tried to retrieve it, but it was so frail that it fell apart the second I pulled it toward me. One thing about it stood out in particular. It had strands of fiery strawberry blonde hair dangling off of it, just like Faye's. I need your opinions on this. As far as I know, Faye cannot climb trees. Then again, there's apparently a lot I don't know about Faye. My fiancé went out around 7 p.m. and picked her sister Becca up from the airport. She insisted I stay home and rest. I think she feels bad about how often she deprives me of sleep. I reluctantly obliged. They came home at about 9 p.m., and with them was Becca's son Caleb. I know nothing about babies, but Caleb is pretty cool. He cries less than my students and is smarter than half of them, and Faye absolutely adores him. Becca and I caught up over hot chocolate in the living room while Faye unleashed the full scope of her maternal instincts upon Caleb upstairs. She sang lullabies, laughed, cooed, and basically went mommy crazy. I know that when Becca leaves, I'm gonna have to deal with Faye crying and wishing we had kids already. Becca is tough as nails, just like her sister, and it comes from being raised in a strict military family. But having a strict dad also teaches girls how to be expert liars, and I got the sense that Becca was selling me all sorts of bullshit when I told her about what we went through at the cabin. Becca is 5 years older than Faye and has already been married twice. She has a 10-year-old daughter with her first husband. She claimed that she only went to the cabin at Pikes Peak once. She said that the drive up there made her car sick, so whenever her parents went there with Faye as a little girl, she'd sleep over at a friend's house instead. She also told me she had no idea what the number 5 means to Faye, and dodged me like a minnow when pressed. I get the overwhelming sense that she is deeply troubled by Faye's behavior, and not just because it's creepy. She knows something she's not saying. Faye's entire family seems to be keeping me out of the loop about something big. A very tech-savvy Redditor offered to help me track down Jennifer, and he delivered. When I checked my email that night before bed, he had provided me with an email address and phone number of Jennifer's husband. She remarried after Tom hanged himself. Tom was so deeply disturbed by his experiences at the cabin that he couldn't take it, even after moving to Nevada. Or maybe he just couldn't take Jennifer. I emailed the guy. His name is William, and he got back to me the next day and asked me to call him. I explained the situation to him. He informed me that he and Jennifer had moved to Washington State years ago, but she started abusing prescription medication a year into their marriage. Over the course of a few weeks, she repeatedly told William she'd heard her daughter, who died in childhood, calling to her from the forest outside of their home. One night, when William got home from work, the back door was open and Jennifer was gone. She left with her shoes and jacket. Jennifer went missing for almost 6 months. A group of campers found her remains about 40 miles away. She had been buried in the ground with her legs sticking out. They had been gnawed clean by wolves. That night, I woke up to the sound of a baby crying. Faye was gone. My first thought was that it was coming from her, because a few weeks ago, she had accurately mimicked the sound of a child's cries while walking around the house at night. But this time, it was Caleb. I walked down the hall that led to the guest room and found the door open. Becca wasn't there, and the crib was empty. I followed the sounds down the stairs, walking past the barf stain on the wall. I'm gonna strip it today. And saw Faye and Becca sitting on the couch. Faye was cradling Caleb in her arms, staring at him, and Becca was babbling on and on about her husband. She didn't notice that Faye was actually asleep. When Faye looked up at me, only the whites of her eyes showed. They were rolled back in her head. She was completely out of it. And she smiled. I stood there for a second, just really disturbed at the scene, and didn't say anything. Suddenly, something moved just outside the sliding glass door behind them, the door that leads to our tiny little garden. It was almost pitch black out there, but the black shape of a man, a huge man, moved away from the glass and vanished into the darkness. Someone had been standing there behind Faye and Becca, watching them play with Caleb. I took off out the front door, hoping to circle around and intercept the man. We live in a housing complex that has a walkway that goes behind all the houses, and the only thing separating it from each backyard is a tiny little wooden gate that you can literally step over. It's mostly to keep dogs and rodents out, but I ran up and down that path and found nothing at all. There was, however, an oily black substance on the ground about 10 yards away from our back patio. Last night, Faye started mumbling more lullabies in her sleep. I'm guessing it's probably because she's been thinking about Becca and Caleb's visit, and she loves kids so much. She also said, "He's in the stains. He gets up and walks around in the dark." I took the advice of a few Redditors and asked her, Faye, what did you forget? She paused for a long time, then replied, He needs me. Right when she said it, a child laughed somewhere outside. Tomorrow, the Shoshone woman who visited us last month is going to come back with her friend who specializes in hypnosis. I'll report the results when I can. Again, please forgive me if it takes a bit longer. This week is a nightmare. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Irrational Fears. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere that you can to get updates on Irrational Fears and the 31 Days of Horror. And I'll see you guys tomorrow so that we can find out together what scares you.